Lady Chief Justice Dame Sucker has delivered a historic ruling, sentencing Angela Rayner to several years in prison for allegedly abusing her authority to obstruct Reform UK's electoral progress. The verdict has sent shockwaves through the British political landscape, igniting a fierce debate about the state of democracy in the country. As the sentence was handed down, reports indicate that Rayner broke down in tears, visibly shaken by the gravity of the situation. Once a dominant political figure, she had become embroiled in a major scandal, facing intense legal scrutiny over allegations that she deliberately delayed local elections to hinder the rise of Reform UK. The case revolved around Rayner's contentious decision to postpone elections in 9 council areas, a move critics claim was strategically designed to suppress opposition and maintain Labour's hold on power. Prosecutors presented damning evidence suggesting that she manipulated the electoral process for political advantage. Legal experts analyzed the timeline of her decisions and identified significant inconsistencies in her justifications. Witnesses, including government insiders, testified that the postponements were politically motivated rather than driven by legitimate administrative necessity. During the trial, Rayner reportedly became emotional as she attempted to defend her actions, but her arguments failed to convince the jury. She was ultimately found guilty of gross misconduct and abuse of power, marking an unprecedented moment in UK politics, a serving Deputy Prime Minister convicted of electoral interference. Rayner's abrupt cancellation of elections originally scheduled for May, pushing them to 2026, was officially justified as part of restructuring councils from a 2-tier system to unitary authorities. However, this decision reportedly left over 5 million voters disenfranchised in regions such as East Sussex, West Sussex, Essex, Thurrock, Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Norfolk, and Suffolk. The government maintained that the restructuring was necessary for devolution and a smoother transition, but political analysts pointed out that the delays disproportionately impacted areas where Reform UK was gaining traction. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage accused Rayner of blatant election interference, vowing to challenge the decision in court. Opposition leaders, particularly from the Conservative Party, condemned her actions, with Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Holland describing it as an Orwellian power grab. He argued that instead of streamlining governance, Rayner had introduced new layers of bureaucracy to serve Labour's political interests. Polling experts reinforced these concerns, with Conservative peer Lord Hayward revealing that the delays had prevented Reform UK from securing its first council. Analysts suggested that if the elections had proceeded as scheduled, Reform UK was poised to make significant gains, particularly in areas like Thurrock, where they had previously experienced electoral success. Public outrage intensified, leading to calls for an independent investigation and a formal legal challenge against Rayner. As the case escalated in the courts, further evidence was presented demonstrating how the postponements had directly benefited Labour while disadvantaging opposition parties. Pressure mounted within Labour ranks, with key figures distancing themselves from Rayner. Internal reports suggested that senior Labour officials had raised concerns about the legality of the election delays, but Rayner had dismissed their warnings. The legal proceedings culminated in a scathing verdict delivered by Lady Chief Justice Dame Sucker, who stated that Rayner had gravely undermined the democratic process through deliberate and calculated electoral manipulation. The court ruled that her actions constituted a severe abuse of power, warranting a significant custodial sentence. Reports described how Rayner broke down in tears as she was led away from the courtroom, marking what many viewed as the end of her political career. Reform UK and other opposition parties hailed the verdict as a victory for democracy, pledging to push for reforms to prevent similar abuses in the future. The political fallout from Rayner's conviction was expected to be substantial, with Labour facing a major credibility crisis as public trust in the party diminished. Meanwhile, Reform UK capitalised on the controversy, rallying supporters with calls for electoral transparency and fairness. As Britain grappled with the implications of this unprecedented case, Rayner's sentencing reinforced the importance of upholding democratic principles and ensuring that no political leader is above the law. Analysts suggested that the case would be remembered as a defining moment in UK politics, setting a precedent for accountability and justice in electoral governance. Initially, Rayner had framed her decision to postpone elections as a necessary step toward devolution. However, as more details emerged, critics argued that the move disproportionately impacted Conservative-controlled councils where Reform UK was expected to gain ground. Nigel Farage, known for his combative political style, accused Rayner of blatant election interference, branding her actions an affront to democracy. At the time, the full extent of the fallout had not been realised. Reports indicated that Rayner was seen breaking down in tears as she attempted to justify her position, facing widespread opposition across the political spectrum. Even within Labour, murmurs of dissent allegedly began surfacing. A party that once prided itself on championing democracy was now being accused of undermining it. Legal challenges soon followed, intensifying scrutiny of Rayner's actions. While she justified the postponement as part of restructuring councils, critics questioned why only certain areas were affected, particularly those where Reform UK was making gains. Under immense pressure, Rayner reportedly doubled down on her stance, insisting the decision was in the country's best interest. However, opposition only intensified. Kevin Holland harshly criticised Rayner's approach, arguing that she was not decentralising power but consolidating it. He claimed that instead of eliminating the two-tier system, Rayner was creating new bureaucratic structures aligned with Labour's political agenda. Elon Musk also reportedly entered the political discussion, expressing concerns about Labour's government. Reports suggested that he was strategizing ways to weaken Labour's influence before the next general election. His endorsements of right-wing parties across Europe had already caused ripples, and his attention had now turned to Britain. As Musk's influence grew, discussions about alternative political movements gained traction. Reform UK, bolstered by public outrage over Rayner's decision, positioned itself as the voice of the disenfranchised. Nigel Farage seized the moment, rallying supporters with calls to save democracy and vowing to challenge Labour's actions. Labour's internal polling reportedly revealed a significant loss of public trust. Discontent over economic issues, immigration policies, and electoral interference had alienated former Labour voters. Rather than addressing these concerns, Starmer's government dismissed them as right-wing exaggerations. Labour's leadership, failing to grasp the gravity of the situation, was caught off guard. Musk's backing of anti-Labour movements was believed to have accelerated the political shift. Analysts observed that the public was no longer persuaded by Labour's rhetoric. Angela Rayner, once regarded as a key figure within the party, had become a scapegoat for its decline. The combination of legal challenges, public outrage, and Reform UK's rising popularity created a political storm. Ultimately, Labour's downfall was seen as the consequence of its own actions, as its attempts to maintain power through anti-democratic measures had backfired.